Hello and welcome to Blockbuster Backrooms, a show where we take a walk through of a movie each week and decide whether it's dope or not. Today we'll be taking a look at The Ruins. The Ruins is a 2008 horror based off of a book of the same name. The book and the screenplay were written by Scott Smith, and the movie was directed by Carter Smith. It always makes me happy when I find out the author of a book gets to work on the movie adaptation, because then we know it's the real deal. I first watched The Ruins when I was around 14, so it holds a little bit of nostalgia for me in many ways. So let's take a look at it. And, of course, this is your spoiler warning. Right, let's go. We open with a girl sitting in darkness, screaming for help. She frantically tries to make her phone work before being dragged away by an unseen force. We then meet our protagonists of the film, all hanging out at a pool in Mexico. There's Amy, Jeff, Stacy, and Eric. Everyone's just having a good time. Jeff and Stacy are playing cards, Amy's chillin', and Eric's bringing over some drinks. Jeff tells Amy she's getting sunburnt and offers her some sunscreen, but she's like, "No, I'm just flushed." "Honey, you're lying out in the sun. Put some sunblock on your pasty white ass, please." I only bother saying this because rewatching the movie right away means you already know what she's like, and it just means you judge her a bit more, since you know how she acts and it's very fresh in your mind. Amy then realizes that she's missing an earring. They have a look around for it, and that's when we meet Matthias. He's found and returned said earring. The boys offer him a drink, and they get talking. Matthias mentions how he was here with his brother, but he went off with an archaeologist to go check out this uncharted Mayan temple. Having not returned, Matthias is going to go out there tomorrow to make sure he's okay, and he offers for our group to join him. Jeff mentions how no one wanted to go see any of the temples or experience any of the culture the entire time they've been here, but Eric admits to being interested since it's an uncharted temple. The group decides they'll go. That night, we're at a beach party that some of Matthias's friends invited us to, also known as Dimitri and the Greeks. Amy's super drunk and wants to dance. The Greeks come over and give her some more booze. Speaking of which, the Greeks and Dimitri are also meant to be going on the trip to the temple tomorrow. Jeff decides to call it a night, but Amy wants to stay on the beach. He heads back to their hotel room anyway. I'm never entirely sure how I feel about this. He's just leaving his drunk-ass girlfriend on the beach. Chick can't even walk properly, and you're not going to hang around and keep an eye on her. If my boyfriend or girlfriend was piss-faced, I'd hang about and make sure they're okay. Just saying. You gotta look out for your bros, mate. Mind you, speaking of bros, Stacy and Eric are still there, so I guess it's not like he's really leaving her alone. This is also where Matthias cements himself as my favourite character. Amy asks him to dance with her and is getting real up close to him. Matthias is like, "So, Jeff's a really good guy, yeah?" But she ignores him and starts whispering in his ear. Matthias signals for help, and Stacy runs over to friend from Amy. The man has my respect, and Amy's a yucky person. Being drunk ain't an excuse to treat on your boyfriend. While all this is happening, we also find out through a passing comment that Jeff's off to medical school after the vacation, which plays a bit of a role in things to come. The next morning, Jeff's out on a run, and we see the Greeks passed out on the beach. We meet up with Matthias and Dimitri. Dimitri's the only dude in the group that can speak Spanish. They're making a copy of the map to leave with the Greeks, so they can meet up later. We cut to Eric and Stacy getting ready. Eric mentions how whiny Amy can be, and I'm like, yeah man, Amy's the worst character out of all of you. Flip, man, even one of the characters in the film doesn't really like her. We also get to see Jeff and Amy getting ready. Amy's spewing in the toilet and doesn't really want to go, while Jeff, the psychopath, is putting clean clothes on despite still being wet from his shower. Also, kudos to this film for showing a naked man. Never front on, but still. There's a lot of pandering to horny male audiences in horror, and boy do I want equality. Pander to your horny female audience too. Nah, for real though, it can actually get pretty nasty at times. I remember watching an interview with a chick who worked on a film set. I can't remember which movie, I'm sorry, but I do know it was an older one. And she said they were forced to put in a pervy shower scene of all the girls so that they could get the, get-go to make the film. Stuff like that is immensely gross. And the real kicker is, despite all the pussy and titties you'll see, it's so rare to see a bare man booty or unsheathed dick. And a movie would never face possible non-existence for not having said man booty and wiener in there. Movies that pander to all sides or just treat the natural human body as just that, the natural human body, get some serious respect from me. But also, if you're going to pander, why just pander to your hetero male audience? Us chicks are no better. Everyone's horny. Make some bank off that. Anyway, I've gotten a bit off topic. So Jeff convinces Amy to come and our group sets off. Our babes get off the bus and Amy just starts to take pictures of some kids. Bro, oh man. It's so rude and honestly gives off kinda gross vibes. She doesn't even ask. Man. They find a taxi and the driver doesn't want to take them out to their destination. Dimitri bribes him with some cash and our babes are on the move again. Amy's upset because her dumbass chose to wear jandals to go explore this uncharted Mayan temple, and apparently she didn't think she'd have to hike out to it. She gets even more whiny when the taxi drives away, thinking she might have to walk all the way back to the town in her flip-flops. Jeff explains that they can call him to come back out when they're ready, and Matthias shows her that he has a special phone that will let him get a signal almost anywhere. They come out at a stream and stop for a bit while Matthias tries to find the path that's marked on his map, while the girls notice and wave to some young children who are up on the rocks. The kids don't react. Matthias notices that some of the ferns have just been pushed into the dirt to hide the path and aren't actually growing. He pulls them out and one of the children runs off. The girls are wary, finding it suspicious that the pathway was covered up. Jeff thinks that maybe the archaeologists didn't want people walking in on their dig. Maybe they found something of value and the Mayan tribe was helping to keep it safe. The girls still aren't impressed, but we continue on anyway, since it would be a waste of time to turn back when so close. Our group comes out into a clearing in front of a huge temple that's absolutely covered in vines. They're taking in the view, and Amy gets Stacy to pose for some photos. She does a little spin for the camera, giggles, and is like, I know, I'm a dork. which gives me raw flashbacks to r/not like other girls. While we're doing this, a man from a nearby tribe appears and starts yelling at them from the edge of a clearing. The boys can't understand him and think that maybe he wants some money, like a toll to see the temple. He doesn't want any though. Flippin' Amy snaps a photo of him because she's rude and she sucks. 2 more dudes show up and all 3 have weapons at their sides, right? Matthias brings up a picture of his brother on his phone and passes it to the first dude. Tensions actually lower ever so slightly as the men look at the photo and talk to each other. However, stupid flippin' Amy is backing up to take more photos of the men. Her camera makes another snapshot sound as tensions instantly skyrocket as the first man draws his gun and starts yelling again. Dmitri walks over and snatches the camera from Amy, stepping into the vines to do so. He starts to walk towards the 3 men, offering the camera out, assuming they're upset because this dumbass has been taking pictures of them the whole time. The 3 men yell some more, but Dmitri still moves towards them a little bit. One of the men shoots an arrow into our boy, which is quickly followed by a bullet to his head. The 3 men yell and low-key brandish their weapons, getting our group to run up the temple. As more men appear at the edge of the clearing, our babes run to the top. There's 2 tents up there, both void of people. They try their phones, but there's no signal, and Matthias's phone is still with the man who shot his friend. They look for another way down, but the tribesmen have surrounded the temple. They're even setting up camps at the clearing's edge. There's no sign of Matthias's brother or the archaeologist he came here with. Oh man, it low-key annoys me when there's clearly a language barrier, but everyone just yells. I know tensions were high, but nobody tried to properly communicate. Charade time, guys, mime that shit out. At least Matthias kinda tried to when he passed his phone over. Matthias, you're a legend, mate. Our group starts trying to work out what to do. Jeff's trying to stay positive, saying someone will come looking for them. They left a map with the Greeks, and if they don't come, the hotel will be looking for them when no one comes to pay for the rooms tomorrow. He's real good too, as he tells everyone that they need to ration food and water, because they may be stuck here for a few days, and they barely have the supplies for one. My boy's smart, instantly in survival mode, and I love it. While they're discussing all this, a phone starts ringing inside the temple. Amy says her first smart thought in the movie, wanting to know how a phone inside the temple could have reception when they can't get a signal on top of it. Everyone ignores her though, as Matthias recognizes it as his brother's ringtone. Everyone rushes into action, as there's kind of this huge pulley system that goes down into the temple through a large hole in the roof. Imagine a giant well, and that's kind of what we got here. Matthias ties the rope around himself, and they start to lower him in. He has a lantern they found in one of the tents to light the way. As they're lowering him, Amy notices that the rope's fraying, but before they can do anything about it, the rope snaps. Bro, there's a solid few seconds between the rope snapping and the thunk of Matthias hitting the ground. Oh, it's a huge oof moment, as I definitely cringed a bit when watching it. We can just make out Matthias's moaning, and our babes rush around once more, checking to make sure the rest of the rope's sturdy before getting one of the girls to go down. Amy's a little bitch about the idea, so Stacy volunteers to go down. Oh, okay. I know I've been ragging on Amy a lot. She's honestly not as bad as I make her out to sound. She just kinda annoys me amongst a cast of likeable characters, which just means I'm a bit more judgmental about what and how she acts. I'm not sorry about it, but it's also probably an important thing to note. Right, so our boys lower Stacy down, and we find the ropes not quite long enough. She ends up jumping down the rest of the way, but fails to land properly and ends up with a massive shard of glass in her leg from Matthias's broken lantern. They throw her down some matches so she can relight her own lantern. Her wound is hella deep and gnarly. Poor Matthias is lying there, unable to feel his legs. Our babes up top are like, okay. We need to make a backboard and get him up here, because we sure as hell can't leave him down there. And he's most definitely got a broken back. Amy's freaking out, not wanting to move someone in his condition. And in any other situation, I'd agree. For whatever reason, she decides that the men that killed one of their party will have to help them now that someone's hurt. And she runs down the temple. Jeff runs after her to try and stop her. Of course, the dudes are ready to shoot her if necessary when she appears. Jeff grabs Amy, and she trips over while trying to get out of his grasp. She gets real pissy and throws some of the vines while yelling at the tribespeople. The water plant hits a small Mayan boy in the group, and the men start yelling at him. When he doesn't move towards the temple, they shoot him. Congrats, Amy. I'm pinning the child death on you. Back at the top of the temple, Jeff's working on a stretcher made out of one of the tents. Having realised that it's not the temple, but something to do with the plant that's gotten them into this predicament. The phone's going off again, but Stacy can't see and just wants to come up. They send Amy down on the stretcher, but it doesn't quite reach the ground. Not wanting to wait down there any longer, Stacy just wants to lift Matthias onto it. For someone so adamant about not moving the man with the broken back, Amy surprisingly doesn't argue. They discuss how they should do it and decide lifting at the shoulders and knees is best. I know they show their thought process in the movie, but their decision still baffles me. First off, Stacy didn't have to stay down there. She could have tagged out with Amy and gone back down again when the rope was made longer, therefore making it easier and safer to move Matthias. Or, since they did decide to lift him anyway, wouldn't you want to keep his back as straight as possible? They even talk about how lifting at the feet will bend his back, while lifting at the waist would arch it. Personally, I would have arranged it so that one of us was on each side. As gently as possible, we slide our hands under his back. One hand up by the shoulders, one near the waist, and the second person's hands positioned between my hands, making sure our palms were under the spine. Of course, this would mean his head and legs would hang, which is really, really bad, but at least his back would actually be supported. Nah, though. Instead, they lift at the knees and shoulders, and Matthias's body practically folds in on itself with a sickening crack. Our poor boys moaning in pain as they manhandle him onto the stretcher. Oh man, I visibly winced and drew back at it, especially the crack. Oh man, that crack happens twice because his back moves drastically again as he's laid out on the stretcher. While writing all this out, I got curious as to how it should have actually been done. So I tried to find something on it. I couldn't find anything pertaining to a situation like this though. The articles and videos were all the same, which is, don't move a person with a broken back. And if for some reason you do have to, you absolutely have to keep their spine as straight as possible. What do you guys think? Is my idea better, or is there an even better way still that the girls could have, moved him? Back on top of the temple, Jeff checks out Matthias. Like the man said, he has no feeling in his legs. The girls want to put him into the tent, but Jeff doesn't want to move him again, which is good. Instead, he gets everyone to search for tents and bags for aspirin and anything else that could be useful. Amy finds some keys, and Jeff finds some plane tickets that belong to Dimitri. Dimitri was meant to fly out at 7 a.m. the next morning with the Greeks, which means they'll come looking when their friend doesn't show up. We just have to make it through the night. Jeff checks on Matthias and gives him a blankie before talking to Eric. He says that they need to make sure they keep his legs clean, because if he's gonna die, he'll die from an infection. And at least our babes aren't going through the night in total darkness though, as there's a crank light that the archaeologists set up. Stacy's in the tent regretting lifting poor Matthias, while Amy wraps her wound in a cloth. Honestly, guys, maybe this is just because the friends I grew up with were too onto it, but does nobody have a first aid kit? Would be out exploring forests or rivers, maybe the odd abandoned building, but at least one of us always had a small kit with a bandage and a couple of plasters, just in case. Flip, when I was little, I'd go hiking with my mum and brother, and Mum would always have a small first aid kit as well. I understand why our Americans might not have one, since it was a low-key spur-of-the-moment decision to come out here for them. But did Matthias or Dimitri not pack one? They were planning to hike out to these uncharted ruins well before meeting the Americans. Or how about the dang archaeologist, knowing he should be out here excavating and stuff? Or even duct tape. I'm 90% sure I saw Jeff use some tape on the stretcher. Maybe not right away, but as the film progresses, it seems like duct taping your wounds would be a really grand idea, especially with how nasty and dirty everything becomes. Oh man, I'm really out here getting mad no one has a plaster, huh? Wild. In the morning, Jeff goes to the edge to take a leak and ends up discovering a human skeleton in the vines. Stacy wakes up to find that the vines have wrapped around and crawled up her leg, now growing into the wound on her knee. We get to watch as they pull the vine out of her. It's pretty nasty, and if you find that hard to watch, then boy do I have a treat for you. While this is happening, Matthias asks Amy to check his legs because something feels off. She pulls back the blanket to reveal that a bunch of vines have wrapped themselves around Matthias, tightly coiling around his legs. Amy screams for Jeff, who runs over from helping Stacy. Seeing Matthias's legs, he instantly gets to work, despite the visible shock on his face. Wrapping straps around Matthias's vines to help stop the bleeding, while Jeff is doing this, we cut back to Eric and Stacy. Eric points out that the plant's growing on them too, as we see what looks like dirt and moss starting to form on their clothes. This movie actually does a really awesome job at showing the moss growing over time. After this scene, it's never pointed out again, but more and more moss appears on everyone's clothes the longer they're stuck there. It's really cool and a dope touch. Oh man though, there's barely any meat left on Matthias's legs, as a wide shot lets us see all the bone and missing flesh in all its gory glory. The phone starts ringing again, and Jeff sends the girls into the temple with some handmade torches. He tells them to split up and move fast, because he doesn't know how long the torches will last once lit. But I'm a little confused on why, to be honest, because they still had at least one of the lanterns from before. Even if it had run out of gas, there's bound to be more somewhere. Maybe the plant ran off with the gas bottle. There's also Eric's phone, which I'm sure could have provided light as well, even if it was given as a last resort light source. Anyway, our girls go down and decide to stick together, which I'm glad they did. The entire inside of this temple is thickly covered in vines. They step into them and go searching. Through a narrow corridor, they come out into a small room where they see a girl hunched against a wall. They touch her shoulder and the body falls to the side with a really weird sound effect. I think it was either meant to be treated as an odd type of jump scare, or they were trying to add to the reveal, as we see that it's the girl from the start of the movie. Her corpse is covered in dark wounds and super dried out. I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity to play with some more fun gore effects, to be honest. It kinda looks like she's just sitting in the vines. What would have been dope is if they had a solid portion of her kinda rotted or eaten away, and when she's pulled back, we could see all that with the addition of the vines growing into her body, which would have been what was holding her against the wall. But, oh well, maybe next time. She is holding a phone though. However, upon grabbing it, it's revealed to be broken. The ringing's still going. Looking around, Amy realizes that it's the flowers making the sound. It's pretty spooky, not gonna lie. When you get close to them, you can hear this underlying screech from the flowers as they mimic the sound. It's really cool and unsettling. Amy deadass goes to grab a flower, and the vines lash out, grabbing her hand. The plant snatches the torches and extinguishes them. Our girls struggle to break free and bolt, screaming at the boys to bring them back up. The scene of them running back through the corridor has a great claustrophobic feel, and I love watching the scenes of them being pulled out as the vines move to grab at the girls. Once out, Amy just storms off angrily, while Stacy sits in shock. Once calmed down, they talk to the girls in the tent. Our babes are like, "Yeah, no, we gotta leave." Eric wants to make a run for it, and Jeff tries to talk him out of it, as he points out that Matthias can't move, and the men were willing to kill a child. Jeff's kind of framed like a bad guy here, to be honest. The way the cameras shot him gives him a real villain vibe. It's also one of the only times we see Jeff get mad, as he yells about how 4 Americans on vacation don't just go missing, which I found a really stupid and low-key self-centered thing to say, but it does fit in well with the American stereotype. I actually decided to look into it a bit. I got ever so slightly off topic, as all the articles preferred to give me death stats instead of missing persons stats. I learned that around an average of 827 Americans die of unnatural causes each year while outside of the country. The statistics were taken around 2014 in the article, so not too far off when the film was made. And the stats were only made up out of the reported deaths, so the number could quite possibly go up a lot more if we knew about the unreported ones. Well, in the grand scheme of numbers and things, it's a small number, but it's still a big number, you know? So, shut up, Jeff. Nobody cares that you're American, and if they do, it's not for good reasons. Yeah, your friends and family will be looking for you, but there's not a huge amount they can do, especially since no one other than two random Greek dudes know where you are. I honestly think they should let Eric try to make a run for it, since he's willing. Your situation was pretty dire before broken backs and the like. Let the man try and get help. Later in the day, we see them rationing out food and water. It's a real sad scene that helps hammer home how bad their situation is. After checking on Matthias, Jeff comes back over to the group and exclaims that he won't last much longer in the condition he's in right now. He wants to cut off the man's legs. Nobody likes the idea and they argue. Jeff tries to explain that if the legs aren't already infected, they soon will be, and it will kill him. They argue some more, Jeff's still trying to reason, pointing out that Matthias can't feel anything below his waist anyway. Stacy ends up agreeing. After all, Jeff's the only one here with any real medical knowledge. What really gets me though, is that they're all talking like Matthias isn't there. They don't even sit with the guy. Apart from the occasional check-in, it's like he doesn't even exist. They just leave this poor man alone, in the corner, next to these scary vines. Matthias actually ends up telling them to do it, because he could hear their conversation after all. Jeff makes Eric help him, and he gets the girls to wait in the tent. The moment Jeff breaks the first bone, Matthias starts screaming. Jeff doesn't stop though, as he cuts away the remaining flesh and pulls the leg off before cauterizing the stump and moving on to the second leg. The girls are naturally upset as they come out and yell at Jeff. Jeff says that he had nerve damage and couldn't feel it. The screams were because he could see what was happening. I actually believe him, but I'm still judging him for it. Like, bro, why didn't you cover the dude's eyes? If he can't see what you're doing, his brain wouldn't say, pain, right? Everyone stops yelling as they notice the vines creep out and pull the severed legs back into itself. That night, Stacy's quietly crying, and Amy asks Eric if he thinks she'll be okay. He says yeah, and that it's all just in her head. Because, well, I haven't mentioned it yet. Stacy's been complaining about the vines still being inside her. Amy also asks if he thinks they'll survive this. And props to Eric for honesty. Our man's just straight up says no. Amy starts crying and Eric offers his shoulder. Stacy hears this and mistakes it for sexy moans. She comes out of the tent and accuses them of fucking each other. It's really awkward, and if it weren't for the fact Stacy's slowly losing her sanity, I'd 100% just think she's being a dumbass. In fact, even knowing about her mental state, it's such a stupid accusation that I do still judge her for it a little bit. Jeff comes out and everyone's arguing and yelling. all while the vines creep over and force their way down Matthias's throat and nose. Yeah, that's right. Matthias is dead. All because these guys were too busy arguing and yelling to pay attention to what's happening around them. My favourite boy is gone. When Stacy ends up telling Jeff that Amy would have tried to sleep with Matthias if it wasn't for her intervention, they all finally look over to our poor boy. They rush over, but our man's full of plant and they're too late. Stacy quickly forgets about the fight as she goes back to complaining about the vines inside her. Eric does kind of make a dark humor joke though. In the middle of all this, he looks at Matthias's body and is just like, well, thank God we cut off his legs. Which, not gonna lie, had me laughing despite the sad scene. The next morning, we see the Mayan tribespeople salting the earth, which explains why the temple's in a clearing and how they've stopped the plant from spreading. Eric gets Jeff to come look at Stacy as we finally see that the vine's actually growing inside her. They cut into her leg and back, pulling these vines out. The one in her back is massive, bro. It's actually insane. We can see the vines moving around under her skin before they pull them out as well. It's brutal. Everyone sits together, rationing out what little food they have left. Stacy's insistent that there's still more inside her, and she wants to cut it out, but they won't let her keep cutting herself, which is fair considering their situation and the blood loss should endure. Amy passes her some alcohol, and everyone sees a vine move around in her forehead as she takes a swig. Realizing that there is indeed a lot more inside her, everyone falls silent and won't meet her eye. Honestly, it's a really sad scene, as Stacy begs her friends to look at her, knowing that her body's riddled with this ever-growing plant. Later in the day, when everyone's taking a nap, Stacy sneaks out of the tent and finds a knife. Waking up, our dudes come out to see Stacy covered in gashes. She assures them that it's okay and that she has to get it out of her. She's full on carving away at herself, and we can still actually see the vines moving around under her skin. Jeff goes over to her and lightly touches her back. She spins around and accidentally cuts him with the knife. She mutters an apology as she goes back to carving. Despite what she must play out, Eric approaches her in the exact same way, and this time the knife ends up embedded in his chest. Snapping out of it, Stacy realizes what she's done and breaks down. Eric soon dies, and as the plant drags his body away, Stacy screams to her friends to kill her. We can now clearly see the vines moving inside of her as well, since there are these big open wounds all over her body. It's really sad, man. I almost cried. They end up killing her off screen, as we cut away to the Mayans, who hear the screaming stop. I actually like that they cut away for this one. I don't think the scene would have had the same impact if they had have stayed. Jeff paints Amy in their dead friend's blood as he tells her what to do. Amy plays dead as Jeff carries her down the side of the temple. He lays her down and then starts yelling at the Mayans as he moves away from her corpse and around towards the side of the temple. On her cue, Amy gets up and bolts, while Jeff is riddled with arrows. The first Mayan man to appear at the start puts a bullet in Jeff's head, outright killing him. Honestly though, these dudes aren't bad people. And I'm glad the film never really portrays them that way. They just can't have the plant spreading and do all they can to make sure it doesn't. We should all be familiar with the concept of quarantine by now. Amy makes it back to a Jeep they passed earlier in the film. Using the keys they found at the temple, she starts it up and gets away. Okay, I always ruin this end scene by thinking about how funny it would be if she just straight up crashed into a tree or something. And it always means I can't focus properly on the vibes and feeling of the scene as my monkey brain is like, haha, she crashed car. The movie ends with the two Greeks going towards the temple, looking for their friend. And that's the ruins. It's honestly a really fun movie, and it has some strong rewatchability. They use a mixture of practical and visual effects throughout the film. While not great, the CGI does actually hold up better than a lot of other movies, since it's normally in dark places or in the background of scenes. The practical effects are amazing though. Oh man, it's great. Gory and fun and I just love them. Despite ragging on them, the characters are actually good as well. One thing that does stand out though is the surprising lack of soundtrack. A standard in all the films I've reviewed so far has been good soundtracks. But nah, not here. You know what though? It actually works really well. They mainly just use ambience to help add realism, and it was the right choice. I think music would have taken away from the movie. In fact, when the end credits song kicks in, it feels really strange and out of place. It's wild. Some of the behind the scenes stuff is really interesting too. Like, fun fact, every single leaf and flower and vine on the temple is handmade by a group of about 12 people. That's insane, bro. That's so much work. The temple is absolutely covered in this plant. Huge props to the plant making team. God damn. The safety requirements they had to meet are wild too. Since the set was so high up, whenever they weren't filming, they had to have safety railings up. And because of safety standards, they couldn't have a real wooden pulley system. So it's actually all made out of metal with a wooden casing around it. They even had a platform under the actors whenever they were going down into the temple, just out of camera shot, as added protection, just in case the rope did actually snap or something else happened. All in all, I recommend The Ruins. It's a good time and a wild ride. Righto everyone, thank you for listening. This has been Blockbuster Backrooms. If you'd like to listen to more episodes, you can find them on mpr.nz/show/BlockbusterBackrooms. You can also find me across most social media as Shit-imma-artist. That's IMMA, because we don't use real grammar here. And last but not least, you can also find the reviews with an accompanying speed paint over on YouTube under Blockbuster Backrooms. And that's it for tonight. I'll talk to you all next time. Enjoy the rest of your evening.